Henry Malanik had come to Canada as a child in 1912. He had a grade 4 education and he had been convicted of several break and enters at age 17. So at this point it's 1929 and he got convicted of several break and enters. But he had no further troubles with the law until 1950. Malanik began an affair with Olga, the wife of Adolf Kafka, his childhood friend and best man. Nasty work. It was a fight over Olga's affections that resulted in a gun battle at their house in Point Douglas. Malanik and Kafka were each fined $50. So times were different in 1950. Let's just put it that way. Love triangle. Guns are drawn. Guns are discharged. The cops come down there. Hey boys, what's going on here? Look, this guy's fucking my wife. Yeah, I'm fucking on his wife. And that should be my wife. Look, guys, what's happening? Well, I shot at him. He shot at me. I feel like this is... Look, how about this? I had to come down here. Each of you guys are going to be fined $50. Now, keep in mind, in 1950, $50 was more like $500. So, it was decent, fine, but it was a fine. So the pussified nation of Canada that stands today, far cry from what it was in 1950. So tragically, several months later, their guns were returned to them at that. So if you've ever had a firearm seized by the police, they don't give them back. They don't. I don't care if it's a pellet gun. You're never going to get it back if they take it from you for shooting at somebody else. So again, times change. Hey, where's my gun? Oh, sorry, I forgot about that. Here, you guys have your guns back. And then on July 15th of 1950, Malanik was thrown out of a wedding reception for being drunk and disorderly. So then he went to the Argyle Street house to see Olga, where he and Adolf got into a knife fight, and that sent Adolf to the hospital. The police were called, and Detective Sergeant Ted Sims, along with Detective Jack Peachel and Detective William Anderson, attended the house. So 3 cops show up. They're like, look, we just gave you guys your guns back. You guys were shooting at each other, trying to kill each other over Olga. You guys got to stop this. What happened? Well, I stabbed him over Olga. Guys, we got to take the knives away. I might have to fine you guys here $60, $70 this time. I don't know. So they all got there. So Malanik had fled, but then he came back with a double-barreled shotgun. And the cop said, whoa, put the gun down. What's going on? So they had a gunfight, him and the cop. And Malanik killed Detective Sergeant Edwin Ted Sims. With a shotgun blast to the abdomen. Pardon me. So Detective Peachel emptied his gun, discharging 5 shots at Malanik. 3 found their target. As the gunfire continued, another rookie policeman accidentally shot Detective Anderson in the neck by mistake. He would later be fired from the force. So a bit of friendly fire. Look, what's going on, Olga? Well, he came back and he stabbed my husband. What the hell? Where'd he go? Well, I don't know, but he's got to stop this. I should have never cheated on my husband with this guy, I guess. Yeah, he probably shouldn't have, dear. But there he is. He's got a double-barrel shotgun. Put the gun down. Ah, bang, 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 bang. Whoa, my neck. Ah. Shit, sorry, bro. Friendly fire. Yeah, we're gonna have to let you go. You're just kind of firing recklessly. So on October 1950, Malanik went on trial. His lawyer pleading for manslaughter charges. So after 40 minutes, the jury returned a guilty plea, and Malanik was sentenced to hanging. Judge Kelly had reservations, believing Malanik might have been too drunk to form an intent to kill, which is one of the better defenses you can come up with, it seems. But the judge said he might have been too drunk, but it's not enough. You know what? I want to put it on record. He might have been too drunk. So they said, okay, well, that's enough for an appeal. But once again, he was found guilty. So this time, Judge Williams had no doubt of Malanik's guilt. The case was appealed all the way to the Supreme Court, but it was denied. And at 2 a.m., July 17th, 1952, as 40 witnesses watched, Henry Malanik went to the gallows, led into the execution chamber, and executioner Camille, that's not the real name, wearing a black beret and a Hawaiian shirt, pulled the lever. So, mind the drip, mind the fit. This is 1950s Canada. Like, I'm trying to explain to you. We used to be a country. The guy put on a black beret, a Hawaiian shirt, and said, let's string them up. Fuck them. 40 people standing there saying, dumb bastard. And, in Tom Selleck Hawaii 5-0 fashion, he threw on the Hawaiian shirt. Jay-Z, Hawaiian Sophie fame. Jane put on the Hawaiian shirt years later. This was in 1950. I don't know that Hawaiian shirts was popping in 1950. So it was a bold fashion statement, but we're dwelling too much on the fit. So as Malanik hung from the rope, blood began to spurt. His jugular had been severed. 2 minutes later, he was pronounced dead. It was the last time a man was hung in Canada's most humane and modern prison, Manitoba's Headingley Gaol. So, hangings continued in other provinces until 1962, but, sometimes a heavier set man, you hang him, it might damn near tear off his head. And in this case, it damn near did, and he bled out, and the 40 people watching it were probably just like, fuck. This is the closest we can get to a lynching up here. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know. 1950s, they're trying to scratch the itch. Hanging, people were doing that in the States as a pastime in those days. So, in other provinces, the hangings continued until 1962, but at Headingley Gaol Cemetery, it's a struggle to feel sympathy and respect one usually has at a burial ground, because the men there are all buried for a single reason: they murdered, and were executed for their crimes. Take Peter Piniak. In 1933, Piniak was 26. He killed Martha Squarerock, a nearby neighbor. Squarerock had apparently been going around telling everyone Piniak was to blame for his baby's death, because he may have abused the child, causing the death. Martha Squarerock was off being a gossip, and she said that he left the baby to freeze to death. And Piniak went over to her house. He had it out with her on her doorstep, and he said, "What are you running around talking about my business," or whatever the case happened with my baby and my son, talking about I left my baby in the snow. And whatever she had to say, he wasn't trying to hear it, because he caved her head in with a log, a piece of firewood. So he wasn't trying to hear it. I don't know if the log just happened to be there. He went, Ted Bundy at Omega Phi Mega, whatever the sorority, just grabbed a hunk of wood and bashed a woman's skull in. So death kind of surrounding the man. He then claimed the life of Squark's 5-year-old son. I guess just figured, I'll just throw him down a well. So he took young Eddie and he just threw him down a water well. Moving very aggressively in 1933. So Pete, they hung him and they buried him off in that cemetery with the rest of them. Another burial is George Jayhan. He was a heroin addict back in 1934. It wasn't easy to come by either. But he was robbing Winnipeg pharmacies for it in 1934. Well, I guess it was kind of easier to come by because they just prescribed it in pharmacies. So, debatable. So he's like, look, this heroin stuff is great. I can't get enough of it. I don't know. It killed my headache, but I can't. I need more. So he was robbing pharmacies. He produced a revolver, forced the pharmacist to the back, tied him up, made off with the narcotic prescription drugs. That was like Oxycontin back then. He's described as dangerous because he was so jumpy, probably due to being strung out all the time in need of a fix. During one morning robbery, just before the Norbridge Pharmacy on St. Mary's Road opened, Jayhan tied up the proprietor in the back like usual, but when he went to the front to get the drugs money from the cash register, the delivery boy walked in. So Jayhan trooped him to the back, put a gun in him, say, walk back here, troop, and tied him up. 2. Then the first customer walked in. Okay, lock the door. Lock the door. That's robbery 101, in my opinion. Lock the fucking door. Like, what is this? Hey, get in the back. Let me get the drugs and money. Oh, shit. Buddy's showing up for his shift. He's late. Get to the back. What are you doing? Holy shit. Where's the drugs and money? Oh, dear. No, we're closed. All right, get to the back. Like, this is... I don't know. The guy's just trying to get his heroin. It's getting crowded in there. So same routine. And then a young boy's passing by the pharmacy. He says, what's going on in there? I don't mean to laugh, but it was like kind of a Monty Python sketch or something. Like, I know most people are too young or Canadian to understand that, or American, but in the UK they had these sketches, Monty Python, and a lot of absurdity unfolded. So, I don't know, it's like the Monkees band, they kind of had a lot of tomfoolery happening. I don't know the best comparison, but very vaudevillian. Anyway, he walks by and he's like, oh, what's going on in there? So he went and called the cops. So the boy saw him leave and 4 friends went in the pharmacy to investigate. But then Jayhan came back moments later because he'd left behind the basket of narcotics. Did you ever just have one of those days? Like, what the fuck? I'm trying to rob this fucking place. People keep showing up. This kid called the cops. I'm in the fucking middle of this thing, and I forget my fucking heroin that I'm robbing from the pharmacy. I don't know what was going on in 1939, but in today's day and age, we call that a shitty day. So, Jayhan would one day be telling fellow inmates, the boys were too many to tie up, so he just ushered them in the back, told them not to move, and long story short, the incident ended tragically when the policeman shows up, and Jayhan carjacked the vehicle, and, he had the father and son drive him to Water Avenue, and that's where, so he's done the robbery, he went back, he got there, and he was like, what the fuck's going on here? Whoa! Get out of the car. Hey, you, come drive me. I don't know. This guy is an outlaw. And he said, take him to Water Avenue. So Sergeant Verne caught up with him there, and the two faced off behind the stolen vehicle. And, Jayhan shot Sergeant Verne with 2 bullets to the stomach and killed him. Cop killings was a lot more common back then. So there's a select group. Jayhan and Piniak belonged to a select group of 16 prisoners who were executed at the Headingley Gaol Gallows and buried there, just west of the penitentiary. Executions began in Headingley Gaol in 1932, ended in 1952. So 20 years of hangings, 16 guys got hung. With the hanging of another cop killer, Henry Malanik, Canada abolished the capital punishment in 1976. So in total, 25 men were executed on the scaffold at Headingley Gaol, now called Headingley Correctional Centre. In the case of 16 of them, the bodies went unclaimed by friends or family, so the Gaol buried them. So I guess it was 20 years, 26 got hung, or 25 got hung, but 16 of them, the family didn't even want to claim them, so they just buried them at the jail. It was a law that required offenders be buried within the penitentiary walls. They don't to claim them. The Headingley Gallows were pretty active in the 30s with 15 hangings, only 6 in the 40s, and then 4 from 50 to 52. The execution chamber still exists and is the last standing permanent gallows in Canada. It's in fine running order too. In 2004, guards assigned a troublesome prisoner to restore the gallows in order to channel the energies constructively. So it's causing too much trouble. Why don't you go fix up the gallows? So interesting project for him. It worked. Glenn Glaze, behind bars on an 18-month sentence for arson, endangering life, had carpentry skills, and putting them to work had a calming effect on him. This is what I like doing, Glaze told a newspaper reporter at the time. His work included everything from removing dung left by pigeons to reinstalling the trapdoors. Gallows are basically a beam with a nose and a trap door. Gordon Harding, a retired correctional officer, recalled last week the gallows were on the main floor and the trap door opened to a small chamber in the basement. You enter through a steel door, however, there are no scaffold steps to climb. Like in the Western movies, said Harding. A trap door would open like a chute, pulled by powerful springs, and the prisoner's neck would snap from the drop. A doctor would go below and check his chest and make sure he was taken or not. Taken to the afterlife, said Harding. The death sentence still existed when Harding started work, but the executions had stopped. One of the oddities of the gallows was the rope left a burn mark on the wooden beam every time it was used. You could see every burn mark from the drop. Some of those guys were a little heavy, and there must have been a little slack in the rope, so when it tightened, it just burned the beam, said Harding. The unclaimed corpses were originally buried in a small cemetery within the penitentiary walls near Assiniboine River. Too near, as it turned out, because by the 1970s, caskets were starting to slide into the river. The riverbank was caving in, explained John Heaps, who's an 83-year-old correctional officer at the time. Still working. Ice would come down in spring and cut out the bank. It washed away the bank and caskets were starting to show. Gruesome. You see that in New Orleans and sometimes those type of places. That's where they get the idea of like the living dead, people rising from the grave and people thinking, oh, Jesus is coming back. No, it's kind of just erosion and tectonic plates shifting and moving up in the bedrock. But yeah, that was in about 1970. They kept it very quiet. A chain link fence marked the cemetery. There was no signage. There was only a large wooden cross made out of 4x4 lumber, flaking its white paint. Corrections staff cut the grass regularly. The grave markers are footstones made of concrete with a contrasting black plaque providing the barest of details, the deceased name, and date of execution. Not surprisingly, most of their victims were women. The story of Walter Stoney, who was hanged in 1951, is not atypical. His victim was Martha Perrault, a mother of 6. He stabbed Perrault 18 times during a drinking session in his room at the National Hotel near Higgins Avenue. Now, at that time, it was probably actually a little bit of a nicer hotel. But he got too drunk, just stabbed the woman out 18 times. I don't know if she was associated with him in some way, but Headingley, sometimes they conducted a triple hanging. On February 16th, 1939, Peter Korzanowski, William Kanuka, and Dan Pritula were all hanged for their roles in the murder of an 81-year-old Anna Kotick, of Gilbert Plains. Kotick and her husband were attacked as they slept in their farmhouse on May 13, 1938. Kanuka was the only one choosing to speak when the guilty verdict came down. He said, "I did not enter the house and I killed no one, and I do not think I should be hanged." Unfortunately, even back then, that's not the way it works. You go in for a robbery, if it ends in a murder, you're culpable for it, and you're going to face the outcome. I don't know if they had opportunity to tell back then, and they took it lenient, but he took it to trial, he blew trial. He thought he was going to beat it because he wasn't actually physically there, but I mean, in 1938, there was nothing close to any forensic science, so it was basically his own word. Anyways, the families of the executed refused to claim their bodies, so all three were buried at Headingley. One of the juiciest stories is that of Clarence Charles Richardson, who murdered his married mistress. Anne Vardy was discovered buried under a heap of snow along St. James Street on January 2nd, 1948. Her skull had been fractured, struck at least 8 times with a hammer. Initially, Richardson denied Vardy was ever in his truck. He claimed he was driving to Selkirk on January 2nd and happened to see her, and a man pushing a taxi cab out of the snow near Middlechurch. And so Richardson's story quickly fell apart. It was known that he and Vardy had an affair earlier, although Richardson claimed it was over. Vardy wasn't his only lover, apparently. It was also found he also had a girlfriend overseas in Germany he met while in the service. So Richardson wasn't Vardy's only lover either. Vardy was married to an electrician, but obviously they lacked electricity together. She also had a boyfriend at the bowling alley with whom she'd become pregnant. So, a busy gal. Anne Vardy, girl about town, 1948, living her life, turns up dead. So, by trial's end, Richardson's lawyer conceded his client's murdered Vardy. His client murdered Marty, but claimed he had amnesia and wasn't responsible for his actions. The prosecution said if he'd lost his memory, it was only for those actions he wanted to forget. If he had amnesia, why did he remember the concocted story of seeing Vardy pushing a stalled taxi cab? And how was he able to repeat the story several times? Guilty. He was hanged November 5th. The Gaol Cemetery can be found by turning south at the brown principal meridian sign west of Headingley Correctional Center on Highway Number 1 onto a dirt road. The cemetery becomes quickly apparent. A long line of prime ministers opposed to the death penalty began with John Diefenbaker and ended only with Stephen Harper, who has openly supported the death penalty. So in 2001, the Supreme Court decided in Burns that it would be a violation to the Constitution for Canada to extradite a prisoner who faced the death penalty where destined. Okay, so this is in the modern days times now. In 2005, the Canadian government signed and ratified the second optional protocol to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. With no mechanism for withdrawal, this legally prevents any return of the death penalty in Canada. As a full abolitionist country, the only Canadians at risk of execution are in foreign countries. Presently, there are Canadians in Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United States who continue to be at risk of the death penalty. Half of Canadians continue to believe that it is time to bring back capital punishment, a new research poll had found. In the online survey of a representative sample, 51% of Canadians are in favor of reinstating the death penalty for murder in Canada, while 37% are opposed and 12% are undecided. Support for capital punishment is highest among Canadians 55 and over, which is 55% of those at that age, and drops slightly amongst those at 35 to 54 to 51%, and then those 18 to 34 are at 47% support of it. More than 3 in 5 Canadians who voted for the Conservative Party in last year's election, 63%, are in favor of reinstating the death penalty for murder in Canada, along with 52% of those who supported the NDP and 49% of those who cast ballots for Liberal Party candidates. So it doesn't really matter your political leaning, whether it's left wing or right wing. About half people in Canada, more or less, are in support of the death penalty, capital punishment. So, you know, it breaks down the data, but it's basically half. So they did the study. It's a divisive issue. We're pretty much split down the middle on it as Canadians. Many don't like the idea of murderers living off the Canadian taxpayers for the remainders of their lives. It costs about $341 per day per inmate. Over $124,000 per year per inmate hardly seems feasible. In Manitoba, to generate $124,000 in income taxes, one would earn just over $300,000 of employment income. Most people don't earn that, so we're not really making enough money in taxes to even just cover the victim. And that's federal and provincial taxes combined. So to cover, the prisoner. Each year, we're bleeding out money. It's an inflationary cause, our justice system. So one solution is, well, why don't we just execute them? Solve it. Balance the budget. So there's not a lot of Canadians that are earning that. About 0.8% of people, of the people who earn any income, earn that much. So it's 0.8% of those who even have a job are making that type of money in Canada. That's as of 2020. There were 1,642 inmates, so 618 fewer than on February 3rd before the pandemic hit Canada. So pandemic, I guess, kind of decreased the amount of inmates when the daily average was 1,780 adult inmates. So that math doesn't add up, but it's gone down some. It would seem that the model is currently not exactly sustainable. It depends, I guess, how many people are going to jail compared to how many people are making the money. So technically, there's enough taxes to cover it. It is sustainable. There's enough taxes to house people, so it seems less of a necessity to be executing them. So we're saying, well, not that many people make that much money. Yeah, but not that many people are actually in jail, so it kind of works out. So there really isn't any truly legitimate justification for taking a human life behind a crime. There's no moral high ground. There's simply a different set of circumstances for each people under which they would justify becoming a killer. And that's what a lot of people don't really understand, is that under the right set of circumstances, anybody's probably capable. It just takes the right push. I took that from the Joker, kind of, on Batman, the Dark Knight movies. But at the end of the day, the bar is set much lower for some than others, but the bar is set somewhere for everyone. Many would kill to protect themselves or their loved ones. Many would kill for revenge, survival, or financial gain. There are estimated to be thousands of executions carried out in China, where execution data is considered a state secret. Secrecy practices in North Korea, Vietnam, Oman, and Belarus also prevented Amnesty from determining the number of executions in those countries. So excluding China, 3 Middle Eastern countries, Iran did at least 314 executions. Egypt, at least 83. Saudi Arabia, 65. Collectively accounted for 80% of the confirmed executions in that year, 2021. Executions in Iran increased by 68 in 2021, the highest it carried out more than 500 executions in 2017, was the highest it ever did, and it was up 28%, which doesn't add up, from the 246 confirmed executions in 2020. So I don't know who's doing these studies, but like, this is basic math. At a glance, it's not adding up. But there's a lot of executions going on in Iran, Saudi Arabia, Middle East, North Korea, China, Vietnam, probably even more over there. So there's no way to tell how many of the 1,561 people executed in the U.S. since 1976 may have also been innocent. Courts do not generally entertain claims of innocence when the defendant is dead by execution. Defense attorneys move on to other cases where clients' lives can still be saved. It is now broadly accepted that the judicial review provided to death penalty cases in the United States has been inadequate to prevent the execution of at least some prisoners who were wrongfully convicted and sentenced to death. Some cases with strong evidence of innocence included, and I mean, there's a list going back to the 80s. I'm not gonna name off everybody. There's quite a few, no notable names that jump out. But we'll wrap it with this. It seems that Canadian society is not comfortable with being no different than the supposed murderers in the likelihood that they would be inevitably a party to the murder of innocent victims who were wrongfully convicted and subsequently executed. In past Winnipegology episodes, we've touched on past wrongful convictions in Winnipeg. We know that it happens whether we want to admit it or not. For now, in Winnipeg, the only eye for eye justice that is carried out is in the streets. Often that revenge is extracted on some random person who had nothing to do with anything. Bloodshed finds a way to beget more bloodshed one way or another. Whether it's exacted by the courts or by the survivors, there always remains a hunger for revenge, and that cycle can be extremely difficult to break. As such, it compounds on itself and can grow into widespread gang violence. Some advocate for capital punishment so that revenge can be carried out with the appropriate checks and balances, which they hope will discourage vigilantism. It does seem rather arcane to be hanging people by a rope as blood spurts out of their necks. That is, until our loved ones are taken from us, directly. At which point, many surviving victims would feel that to be not arcane enough. Winnipegology.